Okay, it is 6 o'clock. This meeting is now in order for the Board of Adjustments for the City of Socorro.
Thank you and good evening all. Starting with item number 2, establishment of quorum. I'll be taking roll call. Jesus Ruiz,
Here.
Miriam Cruz,
Present.
David Oropesa, absent. Ben Aras,
Here.
Jesus Miguel Chaides, absent. Albert Lagunas.
Here.
We have quorum with 4 commissioners present. Moving on to item number 3, excused absence, commissioner member. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to wait till the end in case someone comes. I think one of the members was going to come later. Oh, okay. Well, never mind. I take back my motion.
Do I have a motion to excuse absence of commissioner members?
Motion to excuse.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion made by Ben Aras to excuse, second by Albert Lagunas. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstain? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 4, reading of the Board of Adjustment statement. Mr. Ruiz?
The Zoning Board of Adjustment of the City of Socorro is now in session. This board is established under Article 211.008 of the Texas Local Government Code and Chapter 2, Division 5 of the Code. In appropriate cases and subject to appropriate conditions and safeguards, this board is empowered to make special exceptions or grant variances to the terms of the zoning ordinance that are consistent with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance and in accordance with any applicable rules contained in the ordinance, and to hear appeals that allege an error on an order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official in the enforcement of the code. Your application or appeal will be decided only after you have had the opportunity to present evidence before the board for its consideration. Other parties interested in your case may also be heard at this time. No consultation among board members has been held in advance regarding your case. This board does not act in an arbitrary manner. You may be sure full consideration will be given to your case, and following this hearing, you will be promptly notified of the board's decision.
Moving on to item number 5, swearing of all the people giving testimony. Mr. Ruiz?
Okay. If anybody is giving testimony to any of the cases today, will you please rise and raise your right hand? Si alguien va a dar testimonio ahora, por favor, levanten.
Sí, por
Sí.
favor, si se puede parar.
Si se puede parar. Y luego con su mano derecha. Sí, sí. I'm going to read it in English and then Spanish for everybody, okay? Do you all prefer Spanish or English? Spanish? Okay. ¿Jura decir la verdad y nada más que la verdad? Sí. Okay.
Moving on to item number 6, consider and take action on the approval of meeting minutes of July 27, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 27, 2023.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Jesus Ruiz, just to confirm. I have a motion made by Miriam Cruz to approve and second by Jesus Ruiz. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstain? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 7, consider and take action on the proposed variance request to the Muni Code Chapter 46-293 2D related to the minimum side setback required on 10425 Ethel Hart, Socorro, Texas 79927. Mr. Botello?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Jose Botello, planner with the City of Socorro. Item number 7 is the variance request for the side and front yard setbacks at 10425 Ethel Hart Street. So A little bit of info on the property. It is currently zoned R3. The square footage of the property is 5,045.65 square feet. So the summary is the applicant is requesting a variance from the required front and side yard setbacks. The code requires a 5-foot side setback and a 15-foot front setback for R3 zoning. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow a 0-foot setback on both the side and the front. And so some background, the property contains a single-family house. The applicant has built shading structures to the side and the front of the house. Code enforcement issued a notice of violation on September 2019 and April 2021 for building without permits. The BOA application was submitted on November 2021. And so the statement of the issue is as follows. Number one, permits for the structure were not acquired prior to the start of construction for both structures. And number two, the structure was built on an existing driveway without the proper spot footings for the columns. And so staff recommends denial of the variance request. The alternative in this case would be to approve the variance request with the condition that the owner pay the permit fees at 200% in accordance with section 6-187 of the code, homeowner starting work without a permit in a residential area. And so this is a zoning map showing the subdivision and the property 10425 Ethel Hart Street. The aerial image of the subject property, followed by the application, followed by an engineered letter, the letter from the engineer that was requested in the previous meeting. And as a disclosure, the letter provided is from a civil engineer. And so these are pictures of the property. Some of these are areas, you'll see areas that have a symbol, and this is where, so the column, the spot footing that is recommended for bearing the load of these types of structure, there's no evidence that there was, there's no markings for a saw that indicates that the existing driveway was modified to add the spot footings for this structure. As well, you can see on the left, on the picture on the left, there's no support for that structure. It's my interpretation, it's leaning on the house, or it's being supported by a small 2x4. And there's also, on the right side, on the right picture, you see a light fixture. Also, there was no permit obtained for that, so not having the permit indicates that there's a fire hazard. And so there's some additional pictures of the structure.
Sorry, before you go on, you had an arrow on the, was there something significant about that?
Well, so the size of the vehicle, also the fact that there's no trucks, commercial trucks allowed in R3. It's a concern because of, there could be a possibility to hit the structure.
Right. And so could you tell us when that picture was taken?
That was taken by Mr. Valderrama. I'm not too sure on when it was taken, but I know he did. The pictures that are provided were taken from him, and they were from this year.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Do we have Mr. Vasquez here today?
Yes.
Sí. Okay.
Si puede pasar para enfrente y da su nombre, por favor.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Héctor Vázquez, soy el propietario de esta propiedad. Esto, yo vengo a pedirle al concilio, ¿verdad?, que me pudieran dar la oportunidad de conservar mis tejabanes, ¿verdad?, porque pues los hice con toda la intención de, no con la intención de faltar a las reglas de la ciudad.
Mr. Vasquez, ¿nos puede dar su nombre nomás para el récord, por favor?
Oh, Héctor Vázquez.
Do we need anything else? Okay. Gracias. No, sí, puede seguir platicando, más para darle para que tenga su nombre.
¿Cómo?
Está bien, puede seguir platicando.
Ok, entonces le digo, nosotros tenemos 20 años allí y esos tejabanes se hicieron, el de enfrente, el de los carros, lo hice hace como 15 años y los otros hace como unos 10 o 7 años más o menos. Yo no tengo cómo comprobar que desgraciadamente pues hice las cosas mal. Yo ahorita nomás lo que vengo a suplicar es de que me den la oportunidad de conservarlos. Ya fue un ingeniero que Mr. Valderrama me dio la lista y es la carta que está allí. Él ya me dijo cuáles eran las cosas que tengo que hacer para asegurarlo más, pero que él no ve inconveniente y es lo que Mr. Valderrama me dijo. Anteriormente había podido yo hacer la alegación de que yo había concertado una cita con el señor Mr. Leoni, pero ya no lo quiero traer aquí porque ya no tiene caso. Aparte, no tengo cómo comprobar. Entonces ya no voy a insistir con eso, únicamente pues vengo a pedirles, ¿verdad?, que me permitan la oportunidad de conservar mis estructuras así como están, por la razón de que todo eso se construyó mucho antes de lo de la pandemia. A partir de la pandemia, bueno, antes de la pandemia me iba muy bien en el trabajo y pues fue cuando pude hacer todo eso. Después de la pandemia hemos estado, bueno, yo me dio un diabetes, me he enfermado mucho, mis pulmones también, ya no puedo trabajar mucho. Trabajo una semana sí, una semana no, y pues sería para mí un sacrificio muy grande tener que quitar mis construcciones y quisiera ver pues si es posible que me pudieran dar la oportunidad de continuar con ellos. Como le digo, yo voy a seguir las recomendaciones del ingeniero que me dio. Él mismo me va a traer unas personas que son los que van a hacer las cosas que van a hacer que esté más mejor todavía, más reforzado todavía.
Gracias, Mr. Vasquez. ¿Alguien tiene preguntas para Mr.
Sí,
Vasquez?
¿qué son esas recomendaciones que le dijo el ingeniero?
¿Mande?
¿Qué son las recomendaciones que le dijo el ingeniero?
Quiere, como los footings que tienen esos postes son como un pie, pero desgraciadamente como no tomé fotos, o sí tomé fotos, pero pues no las tengo conmigo, de cuando antes de que se hiciera el footing para adentro, no tengo cómo comprobarlo. Entonces sugiere que los fierros que agarran así, el 4x4, estos van a atravesar unos tornillos así, y luego en todos los postes, y luego aparte me dijo que tiene que tener separadores las vigas de arriba, las que están pegadas, tienen que tener unos que los van a enganchar, se van a enganchar todas para que estén unidas una con otra. Eso y otras cosas que me dejó ahí escrito, pero que las va me las van a hacer. Pero no consideró que fuera de peligro, que estuvieran en peligro de que fueran a levantar o algo.
Usted está diciendo que, por ejemplo, en esta foto, que estos footings están dentro del suelo.
Los de enfrente no, los del lado donde está el medio es los que tienen un pie para abajo.
Entonces, ¿dos de qué? ¿Dos de 6?
No, son de 4x4.
No.
No,
dos de los
es la-
6.
Son 6 en total, lo que está preguntando. Son 6 en total y 2 de ellos están en el medio, ¿no?
Los de acá de enfrente, los primeros, los que están en el primer porche, son los que están por encima. Los que están acá de este lado, los que están en los otros 6 y otros 6, esos sí están con un footing de un pie.
Ok, entonces hay 6 en total.
Los que no están, ajá. Los primeros, los que hace 15 años que los
Ok,
pusieron.
hay, vamos a decirlo de esta manera. ¿Cuántos palos hay hacia abajo.
Palos. Columnas, no,
I don't,
seríamos,
¿Me entiendes? Can we just put the photo back, please? The one that shows all the,
ok,
Esas.
hay 6 de esos, ¿verdad?
sí,
En total.
sí.
Y usted está
2,
diciendo,
4, 6, ajá, sí.
y usted está diciendo que 2 de ellos,
No, los 3, los 6, perdón, es que son dobles, perdón. 2, 4 y los otros 2 que están acá. O sea, esos 2 ellos tienen Fury.
está diciendo que todos esos van bajo el suelo, van bajo del...
Ajá, sí, quitando el plástico, el sacatito ese, ¿cómo se dice? Se puede ver que está ahí el agujero. Yo le dije al señor Valderrama, inclusive
Ok.
yo lo quité, yo estaba junto con él cuando él fue a verlo. Y le dije, mire, estos sí tienen footing, y le enseñé y se ve cómo está.
Entonces,
alrededor de-
ahorita me dijo que nomás eran 2 de ellos, ahora está
No.
diciendo que eran todos.
Es que yo me estaba refiriendo, yo lo contaba por uno cada uno de esos. Son dobles, 2, 4 y el otro que está en la orilla, son 6.
Por eso, entonces ahora está diciendo que todos están en el suelo.
Los de este tejado, señorita, los que están en el frente son los que no están dentro de él. Perdón, ya me equivoqué. Estos son los de enfrente, estos son los que están afuera, sí. Esos sí están afuera. Perdón. Sí, ya me recordé. Este es los del tejabán de los cabos. Sí, estos son los que están afuera. Esos son los que, en esos fierros que están a un lado, a ver abajo si lo ven, son los que van a atravesar los tornillos que van a reforzar.
Mr. Vázquez, nomás cuando si habla, por favor, se queda en el micrófono para que lo recoja.
Oh, perdón. Ok.
Am,
Es que yo pensé que estaba
¿qué
viendo
otras,
los de...
¿Qué otras recomendaciones le dio el ingeniero?
No, me dijo con eso era suficiente, porque no, o sea, él los considera bastante fuertes, pues si
Ok.
tienen 15 años y no
¿Y ya lo hizo?
¿Mande?
¿Ya hizo las
No, las
recomendaciones
personas
que
es que si ve la fecha, yo batallé mucho para que pudiera venir un ingeniero. Está muy reciente, hace apenas una semana. Yo soy troquero y me voy por una semana, 2 semanas. Entonces apenas me confirmaron que iban a venir las personas que lo van a hacer.
Sí, creo que tiene fecha del 7 de agosto, estamos a
Ajá.
24.
Sí, ahorita.
Ah.
Pero yo, por ejemplo, la semana pasada no hubo nada de trabajo. Y esta semana, para poder venir aquí, yo no me voy el lunes. Porque si yo me voy el lunes, yo ya no vengo hasta el sábado o domingo. O sea, yo pedí toda esta semana para poder asistir a esta junta.
¿Sabe más o menos cuánto le van a cobrar para arreglar lo que el ingeniero le
No
está
tengo la
recomendando?
menor idea. Pero lo que haga falta, pues se tiene que hacer. Yo prefiero eso a que me los vayan a tirar.
I don't have any more questions.
Well, I think the problem that we're talking about is a variance, right? And he doesn't have the variance. And last week, we talked about, or last meeting that we had, we denied a variance to this. Unfortunately, I would have a motion of denial for this because of the variance issues.
Can I ask a question to Mr., is it Botello or Botellón? Botellón, sorry.
Before we do that, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Sorry, yes.
I'll second it, just so we can continue on.
Okay.
So, I forgot what I was going to ask.
The what, sorry?
Do you want me to read it, the motion?
We can make a motion in a second, and then we can continue with the discussion, correct? Yeah.
I have a motion made by Miriam Cruz.
By Mr. Arras.
I
No,
apologize.
But we're not going to take the vote.
No, we'll
'cause we're
continue
gonna
with the discussion.
discuss. Right. So,
Well, hold on.
Let me make the motion.
She's just going to read the motion in
Yeah.
a second,
Oh, I
and then we'll
see. I'm
continue with the
sorry.
discussion.
I have a motion made by Ben Aras to deny and second by Jesus Ruiz.
I know what I was going to ask. I should know this, but is Mr. Valderrama an engineer? No, he's the building official. Building official, okay. And do we have an engineer on staff?
We do not have one on staff with
Okay.
the city requires engineering work, we contract out with.
Sorry, yes.
So Mr. Valderrama's title is building official,
Sure.
and we do not have an official city engineer. We have contract with a couple of different engineering firms when we need engineering work.
Correct. Okay, I was only going to ask that, but I guess, I mean, the request is for the variance, but it's also, we'd be the variance of the setback, right? Because it's literally at the sidewalk, and we've discussed why that's an issue. But it's also, I guess, potentially a variance to the structure itself, because at least Mr. Valderrama was not comfortable with the building itself, or the structure itself, right? So even though I guess that's not part of the request, technically it kind of is, right?
The structure itself is what is encroaching, is what is being asked to encroach the setback. And upon inspection from Mr. Valderrama of the property, at the time that he took the pictures, we review it, and so I happen to have a background in architecture. I have my master's in architecture. I understand I understand the drawings that are required, and so we determined that the structure itself is substandard, which is why we required the letter from the engineer. And so it's a little bit concerning because I understand that you might not see it, but the weight that these columns are bearing is enormous. So
No, we can see it on the pictures.
spot
It's-
footings
yeah.
are standard for these types of structures. And so you cannot see that there was cut to the existing driveway to dig and create that spot footing,
Yeah.
which is a bit concerning. Also, the light fixture, there was no permit obtained for that, so who's to say if that job was performed adequately, and that poses a hazard for a fire. And so because there's no setbacks, they're encroaching, the structures are encroaching the setback, that puts the neighbors at risk.
Yeah, and passerbys. Le voy a traducir un poquito, porque no sé si estaba conectado en la última junta. Esto creo que es la tercera,
No, sí
posiblemente
estuve.
la cuarta vez
Sí estuve y no me dejaron hablar.
que discutimos este tema.
No prendí
Pero
el
uno de los problemas es no solamente la estructura, bueno, por lo menos de mi parte y lo que habíamos discutido, no solamente es la estructura que está dentro de su casa, sino también el hecho de que está tan cerca del, I don't know how to say sidewalk.
Banqueta.
Thank you. La banqueta, que está tan cerca de la banqueta, que cualquier persona posiblemente, si esa estructura llega a algo suceder, está poniendo en peligro vecinos, pero también cualquier persona que esté pasando enfrente posiblemente. Entonces, nomás le quería comentar que eso es una de uno de los temas que hemos discutido bastante durante nuestras juntas. Obviamente las juntas las hacemos en inglés por mayoría, pero sí hemos hablado con usted en español y con otros, y nomás le quería avisar por lo menos de esa preocupación bastante grande que tenemos.
Como le digo, yo le dije al ingeniero, ¿verdad? Que, pues, sí, o sea, el señor Valderrama me dijo que lo veía bastante resistente, pero que él necesitaba la aprobación de un ingeniero que realmente fuera ingeniero, que estuviera certificada la carta como me la dio, y me dio una lista, y él es parte de ahí. Entonces, como le digo, pues yo estoy en la mejor disposición de hacer lo que sea necesario para reforzarlo, de manera de que no ponga en riesgo a nada ni a nadie. Pues obviamente mi familia es primero también ahí, ¿verdad? También tengo que ver por ellos, y créanme que pues me gustaría que pudieran ir a verlo para que vea que no está corriendo ningún peligro ni nada. Ahora, como le digo, Pues son 15 años, señorita, también. O sea, yo pienso que deberían de tomar en cuenta también. ¿Sí me entiende? De que pues, yo no quiero sacar esto a colación, pero pues yo confié mucho en este señor Mr. Leoni. Yo sé que ya no está aquí, yo sé que ya no viene al caso, pero pues también pues me tomó el pelo y yo confié en él, ¿me entiende? Es como si ahorita alguno de ustedes me dice, no, mire, confía en mí, yo voy a ayudarlo, y ok, pero yo cómo voy a saber que mañana pasado lo van a encontrar haciendo algo mal y yo voy a ir en medio de eso. Desgraciadamente no tengo cómo comprobarlo, no tengo cómo justificarlo, por eso lo único que me restó fue decirle a Mr. Valderrama, dígame qué puedo hacer, porque yo no quisiera que me quitaran mis tejabanes, porque pues estoy protegiendo primeramente a mi familia por las sombras y todo, y aparte pues fue un sacrificio muy grande, señorita, que se hizo y hace muchos años ya, y pues, créame que ahorita ya no tengo yo la salud para poder remodificar todo eso, pero de hacer lo que sea necesario para reforzarlos y ponerlos seguros, sí lo voy a hacer, claro que sí. Nomás les estoy pidiendo la oportunidad de que me den la oportunidad de que me permitan reforzarlos para poder conservarlos, porque pues se me hace muy feo que me vayan a querer quitar después de 15 años. Ya son 20 años aquí crecieron mis hijos y todo, y pues ahora yo pienso que es justo que me lo tomen en cuenta, pues.
Gracias, Mr. Vasquez. Gracias. Mr. Botello, I have a question for you, and it's related to the point that Mr. Arauz made, that this is basically requesting the variance, and the recommendation is to deny, correct? And then I see that the alternative, of course, would be to approve, and then that they would have to pay the 200% on the fees. But it doesn't, I guess my question to you is, neither one makes mention to the letter that was provided by the engineer. I know that when we first had this case, maybe it was when we discussed it, that was one of the conditions that we gave Mr. Vasquez, that he needed to go and obtain a letter and have them assess it and make sure that if it was structurally sound or not. So now that we have the letter, it doesn't make any notice of any modifications that should be made, like Mr. Vasquez is mentioning. So I can't say that there were any recommendations that were made on that end, but the letter says that the structure is structurally sound. So when the recommendation was made by staff to deny, was the letter taken into consideration?
Yes, sir, it was. And just to be, safe and to be transparent, we looked at the credentials from the engineer, and so it was determined that the engineer who provided the letter is a civil engineer. So it would have helped the case to have a structural engineer produce the letter, because that's their forte. That's where their knowledge is best.
So then, Mr. Vasquez mentioned, I think staff mentioned as well, did we provide a list of engineers to him?
Yes, so by the request of the applicant, a list of engineers was provided. We cannot recommend
Right.
an engineer.
So if we provided a list of engineers and we included a civil engineer, and that just happens to be the person that Mr. Vasquez called, I guess in my head, if we're going to do that, then why would we list a civil engineer and just make it? I don't know if that makes sense.
From my understanding and from pulling permits and stuff like that, you're provided a list, and it's a generic list. And if you're going to go and talk to somebody about a road, you're going to talk to a civil engineer, not a mechanical engineer. And if you're going to talk to somebody about a structure, you're going to talk to somebody with a structural engineer. So it's just a generic list that is given out.
Right, no,
by
and I
the city,
understand,
so-
but my question then is, if this had been by a different type of engineer, would the recommendation have changed?
Yes, coming
So-
from more directly from a structural engineer.
So if Mr. Vasquez looked at the list, and I'm just, if he had said, oh, this person, and that person happened to be a structural engineer, and he said this, in my opinion, the canopies are structurally sound, then your recommendation would be to approve the variance.
Yes.
Okay, so it basically hindered on the type of engineer that he got, and that's why we're denying it at this point?
Not necessarily that. Having the engineer and their seal to stamp the their word that the structure is sound, having them inspect the structure, which is encroaching the front and yard setback, then that leads us to believe that the work performed without the permit is sufficient to remain standing.
Okay, and then follow-up question to that is, the recommendation is to go ahead and approve the variance. But I know, and again, I go back to Mr. Vasquez mentioned that recommendations were made. So would there be any other adjustments that he would need if the variance were to be approved? Or will we just be approving it as is?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
I believe we have leeway to amend that to
Okay.
add the recommendations presented by the engineer who reviewed
Okay.
the.
Yeah, because like I mentioned, in the letter, there's no recommendations, it just says it's structurally sound. And so if we go with the alternative, which is just to approve the variance, then he doesn't have to get technically
Any
any
of the
modifications
improvements.
because we're not requiring them from him as part of the motion potentially, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So basically, it's just either approve as is with the 200% on the fees or deny. Okay. And we have a motion on the table.
Yes.
Nomás le estaba preguntando a Mr. Botello del tipo de ingeniero que hizo el trabajo y si la clasificación que él tenía hubiera afectado la recomendación que ellos nos han dado, porque la recomendación que tenemos es de negar la solicitud. Sí, esa es la opinión del staff. Entonces, la recomendación es para negarlo y la alternativa que nos han dado es de aprobar lo que usted está recomendando, su solicitud, solamente que tiene que pagar lo que se debe de pagar por el permiso al 200%. Esa es la alternativa que ellos nos están dando. Entonces, ahorita la decisión va a ser entre negarlo o aprobarlo simplemente con el 200% del pago.
I got a question for you. On the side of the house, I'm seeing this porch city made. We have to have a 5 foot from the wall to the house. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, this is not sound. I don't approve this part from the rock wall. It has to be 5 feet away from the rock wall. So that we have to deny that on the side of the house. The one on the front, it depends on what do you think on the front?
Yeah.
Deny it or leave it? Because the side has to come down. There's no space there. It needs to be by law, 5 foot away from the rock wall.
Right. No, yeah.
So that needs to come down.
I mean, to be fair, the front also
And the front,
is at the edge. I think there might be,
it's right on the driveway, actually.
yeah. And we talked about how, like, in one of the pictures, the car is, sticking out into the sidewalk.
And I'm
stuff like
seeing an
that.
18-wheeler here too, on this picture.
Yeah, they pointed that out
Yeah,
earlier.
that is gonna knock down that wall
That was a
and
concern.
that porch.
That was a concern that Mr. Botello brought forth. Okay.
Yeah.
I deny
I'm-
this.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
All right, we're motion in a second.
So, would you like me to restate the motion?
Please.
Yes, and then we'll take the vote.
Okay, I have a motion made by Ben Aras to deny, second by Jesus Ruiz. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstain? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 8, consider and take action on the proposed variance request to Muni Code Chapter 46-6234 related to the minimum front yard setbacks required on 10646 Horn Circle, Socorro, Texas 79927. Mr. Botello?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. Jose Botello, planner with the City of Socorro once again. Item number 8 on the agenda is the variance request for the front yard setback at 10646 Horn Circle. So the variance request is to allow an accessory structure to encroach the front yard setback. Some info on this property. It is currently zoned A1, which is agricultural. The size of the property is .851 acres. The legal description is Tract 4D2C, Block 3 of Socorro Grant. And so the summary is the applicant is requesting a variance from the required front yard setback. The code requires a 35-foot front setback. The request is to allow an accessory dwelling to encroach the front yard setback by 21 feet 6 inches. And so the background on this, the applicant began building the accessory structure on an existing concrete slab. And so there's a few issues as outlined. Number one, permits for these structures were not acquired prior to the start of construction for the structure, I'm sorry. The structure was built on an existing driveway without the proper perimeter footing for the load-bearing walls. No permits may be issued for any building or structure on the property until a plat has been approved and/or filed for record. This is under section 38-1, applicability of our municipal code. And accessory buildings shall only be allowed in the rear or side of the principal structure. There's also a section on that being referred. And lastly, the lot does not contain a principal structure. And so with these issues, staff recommends denial of the variance request. The alternative is to approve the variance request with a condition that the owner plat the property and pay the permit fees at 200% in accordance with section 6-187, which is, once again, homeowners starting work without a permit in a residential area. And so you'll see the property in question outlined in the yellow box with the A1 zoning. The following picture shows an aerial image of the property and also a image of what used to be in that area, followed by the application, and then some pictures of the property. And so similarly to the previous case, you see some symbols. We inspected the structure, and it was also determined that there was no modifications to the existing driveway to accommodate a perimeter footing, which is also required for load-bearing walls in structures. Typically, that's the assembly. And these are pictures of the inside of the structure. And with that, staff can answer any questions.
I don't, just real quick before, I don't have a question. I just want to comment on the documentation that was provided. I appreciate the cleanness of it, how it goes from one to the next, and then that the pictures have highlights on concerns that we have. So I appreciate that it's a little bit different. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
I agree, ditto. And, but I would maybe suggest that we block out people's emails because it's online. I do have lots of questions, sorry, ahead of time. How much are the permits that would have needed to be pulled?
So that depends on the square footage. And so if they are going to be adding electrical outlets, so we require electrical permits. It just really depends. It's a case-by-case, answer where it really depends on what you're trying to do with the property and the structure itself.
Right, and we don't know if there's electricity inside.
From our inspection, there's no electricity at the moment.
Oh, okay. Let's see. What does that say? What did I write? It's in the front. The alternative, and I meant to ask this in the last item, but the alternative that you guys provide with the paying the permit fees at 200%, do we know how much that is? I guess, again, you're going to say the same thing, right?
Yeah,
'Cause it depends, okay.
it depends on the square footage of the structure being proposed.
Okay. And I guess now I have questions for the applicant.
Do we have Ms. Garcia?
Por favor, nos dice su nombre.
Sí, Claudia Garcia. And I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll let my partner finish, because he knows more about what we're doing. I've lived there since 1992, and there was a mobile home there. And the concrete slab was a driveway to our mobile home that we had there. And so, I mean, just recently with my kids all grown up, we just needed more shed space for all this stuff. And we saw the concrete slab, y pues, how they say, se nos hizo fácil. Oh, pues it's right there. It's within the yard, within the fence, and really we didn't think it was hurting anybody. Or we just didn't think, you know? And so we just thought, let's do it there.
So it's a recent structure?
Yeah, it's
What?
a recent,
When would you say you started building?
November?
Of 2022?
Yeah. And so, but that's why there's even like a half circle, because it was part of the driveway, you know, to the mobile home that we used to have there many years ago. And so we just, common sense, we thought, well, let's just do it here. And the rest of the yard, I mean, it is kind of slow because we irrigate, we sprinkle water. I mean, we have animals, and so they roam around. So that's why closer to the front, it would be the easiest thing. So we're asking, you know, to allow the variance so we could just finish our shed and put away our boxes and.
In the application you wrote, into the question, will literal enforcement of the court create a hardship? You wrote yes. Could you elaborate?
Well, because we bought the material, and I mean, as soon as they told us to stop, we stopped. And so, but it's sitting there, and it's just savings that we had, and that's why we spend it all on material. And so we like the opportunity to finish.
Yeah, and so, can we put the picture, this one up, please? I want, so in this picture that we'll put up in just a second, where I guess it's just a skeleton,
Yeah.
there, where the skeleton ends to the front, seems to be very much behind where the actual building now is.
Yes, and so, because that's the size of, we used to have one of those tarp tents, because we had a tractor, and so we just park it there, because the cement slab was there. So it's always been useful, that cement slab, so it was just the size of the tractor, and we just needed it for space to maneuver when we would pull it out. So that's why it was the perfect size. That's why it landed there, that tarp shed. But eventually the tarp, they fades away and it tears up, and that's why the shell.
Yeah, and so I guess my question would be, I mean, because we're asking for at least a variance of,
So
when
we,
it should
when
be
we built,
30,
yeah,
when it-
when we extended, we just thought, hey, we have the space, let's just go up a little further.
right, and so, I mean, you're asking for, it should be 35, but it's going to be, or it is right now, 13? Right? If we do the math backwards, because you guys wrote the front yard setback by 21-6, so, I mean, I'm okay in math, but I'm pretty sure that's right. So I guess my question would be, how much building would be cut off if we enforce the 35?
I'm not sure, but my partner can speak on behalf of that.
Okay.
Por favor, nos da su nombre.
My name is Dorian Cervantes. I'm not too sure as far as how much, I just know that from the chain link fence to the building is 13 and a half feet,
Right.
right? I just don't know, I mean,
And we want 35, right? The code, well, we don't want, the code says it should be 35.
well, I'll be losing, let's see,
What, 8?
20, let's see. I mean, I guess it almost seems like it would be back to where that picture that I wanted to see. It almost seems like that would be the cutoff point, no? Maybe?
That would make sense if the mobile home were placed there. The mobile home would have had to.
Have the 35
had
setback.
the 35-foot setback.
So you're gonna be missing about 11 and a half
Is
I'd
it
have to
25?
cut it in half, pretty much.
By 11 and a half
That's like
feet.
Oh, but it's
40-foot,
agricultural.
It's 40 by 16, so I'd have to cut it in half.
Well, no, not necessarily, because you have 11 and a half feet. That's what you'd be losing.
Yeah.
Because you have a 40 by 15 building. That's per your as-built that you have here. So you have a 40 by 15, so you'd be losing about 11 and a half feet because you're at 13 and a half right now from the proposed fence line that you guys have right now. So you're going to be losing about 11 and a half.
And just, you know, the reason I'm asking is because I wonder if we can come to some sort of,
Compromise?
right, because there are many reasons that we've discussed right now and prior and all the time why we discuss that those setbacks are important. Safety being my own at least primary reason. The code says it too, right? That's important. And so I guess for staff, I guess my question would be directed, is there a compromise? Because if they have stopped mid-project, I think it's important that they have to pull the permits anyway, so that they may be able to continue. I don't think they can continue without pulling permits moving forward, if they're gonna move forward. But I guess I'm wondering if staff has any recommendation for a compromise between just, you know, yay or nay, but maybe, I don't know, 20, 25?
Can I ask you a question? I mean, what is I understand the setback, but would it make a difference if it was like like an open porch that it had no walls? Just like would that make any difference? So, I'd make it open instead of enclosed. It's just a shed. It has no electricity, has no plumbing, has no utilities. It's just a simple shed. That's all it's gonna be, so.
Is it anchored?
It's gonna be anchored. Well, see, it's because it hasn't been anchored because in November of last year, we stopped and I have not touched it.
So it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if it's not anchored, it's not a built-in
Fixed
structure,
structure,
fixed
yes.
structure, right? So your variance changes with that, correct?
We did notice that there is powder actuated fasteners. You can see,
Yeah, that's what I thought what I saw. That's why I'm asking.
So
If
it
there's a
is-
way to unfasten it and put it on skids, then your variance is gonna change because it's not a fixed structure. If you're not planning to put any type of utilities in it, then it would be just like one of those Weather King buildings that you're gonna put on a pad. The variance that you have here, it's considered ag, right? So do we have different variances for an ag lot and for a residential lot?
that's a good question.
It's a legal question, no?
Yeah, I'm not sure what is it currently zoned, is it zoned residential, right?
No, it's zoned
It-
ag.
th- That specific
Agricultural.
tract is A1, agricultural.
So,
Yeah, it jumps out to a couple things because it hasn't been platted yet either. Actually, go file the plat first.
Correct.
Then you determine what actually setbacks, what variances would apply. But
Right.
the way it is currently, and it's still a structure, I mean, it's got a roof, it's got walls.
Right. So, I mean, my recommendation to you is maybe go get it platted. And I know you've already put some money into this.
Put about
And
10
it's a
about
shell
$10,000
right now.
$10,000,
Yeah, and it's a shell. I would think about trying to get that elevated and put it on a skid some way, somehow. That way it's not a fixed structure. And I believe, from my understanding, that variance changes because it's not a fixed structure. And if you're not gonna put any utilities, it's a storage shed.
Yes.
So that variance changes. If I'm not mistaken, I think it changes. And the money that you've invested into it, adding a little bit more money to it to get it off the ground, without any type of attachment to the ground, is going to help you in your way to try to get this solved.
back in December, I had hired a gentleman to help me out with this, and we went back and forth, and he did, if I were to go another route and try to, he had gotten an engine, with modifications, of course, but he had gotten an engineer to stamp it and say, okay, if you make these modifications, you know, I mean, aside from the variance, of
Right.
course. Okay, I'm kind of leaning more towards that, putting in the footings, you know, improving the beam, all of that stuff, right? To make it more
Right.
structurally sound, which is not a lot. It really is not
Right.
a lot. But I'm asking that somehow, some way to find a way, like I said, if it was just open and it doesn't have walls on those 11 feet that are closest to the street, I mean, would that fly?
I'm gonna venture to say that we need to table this to
Okay.
figure out what the variance is for an ag build property, because I'm more than certain that that changes. I'm more certain
And-
that the variance changes on an ag property.
And if staff can maybe get his question, the one he just asked, if we can also get an answer to that, about if he leaves open, you know, certain amount of feet at the front without any walls, if that's gonna be something that, that staff recommends that is okay.
I don't think that would be okay, because it would still be a structure, and it would still be encroaching into the variance, depending on what it is, if it's grounded or not, if it's a fixed structure.
So if you find out that because it's agriculture, the variance is less, maybe we could continue?
Well, that's what I'm saying, we need to table this
It's an
to
option.
figure out what the variance is on that.
And then with the plating, they would still, it would be a good idea to plat it, no?
So is there any, I guess, are there any cons for me to plat it? Is that, or maybe that's what before I do anything, I mean, maybe, is there, you know, or should we just wait to see if there's a bigger variance with the agricultural?
I think you want to take it step by step, because I believe plating is for when you're actually trying to build a home, a structure on the land, and you're actually not trying to build and put any type of utilities. So I would wait for the variance first and see where that leads you before.
Okay, take it step by step and
Yeah.
we'll see. Okay.
Yep.
And I mean, it's, in November it'll be a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our fault for not to get, it's my fault for not to get on permit.
Right.
But, I think we'll be patient and we'll just kind of,
I think so.
if you guys are willing to work with us and we'll just
We meet every month, so, I mean, we can, if you guys are ready next month, we'll meet next month. If you're ready in 2 months, we'll meet in 2 months.
When will we get our answer about the agricultural variance?
We can work
Well-
on it for this week.
We have our
So-
attorney looking at it as we speak. I see him on his phone just checking it right now.
No, I wish I brought my laptop, I didn't.
So if I may, Socorro Road, Horizon, Alameda, and North Loop are considered major arterials, and any street that connects to those major arterials is considered a collector street. And so by that virtue, that brings the 35-foot setback to this property, even to R1s. So R1s is typically 25 feet front and back. And so,
But you're not 100% certain what that ag is, because it is agricultural. And it is, I know it's an arterial street, North Loop and all those roads, but they're set back quite a bit.
yes, but the fact that the property is facing a residential collector street, which requires a 35-foot setback,
That trumps, you're saying that might trump the agricultural variance?
I
or
believe
setback?
so. I mean, I think that would be a legal question, but to my understanding, you know, Horn Circle is perpendicular to North Loop, which makes it a collector street.
But is that all those properties ag?
No,
No.
I believe the zoning map shows that the
R2's
property next to it, she owns it as well. That one is R1. And there is R2 properties as well. This is just a,
Then you also got commercial properties, just maybe
correct.
a lot away. So before we even open up a can of worms, I think you need to figure out what the setbacks are and what the laws are for that first, before we make any type of judgment call. So I motion to table it for next month.
Second.
I'll second it. Oh, You already seconded, but I do have one last question. Can I ask
May I
why?
read the motion?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. I have a motion made by Ben Aras to table the motion for next Board of Adjustment meeting, and second by Jesus Ruiz. Thank you.
Thank you. The property next door, you guys own it too. Was it already separated when you bought the properties, or did you divide the property?
No, I bought it in 2006 from my parents, who bought it in 92,
Mhm.
91. But, yeah, it was, I think it was 4 tracks.
You can please speak on the microphone.
Originally, in 92, it was 4 little tracks. But when I
Okay.
bought it, I decided, why do I have 4? Not knowing anything, why do I have 4 tracks if it's all my one property? So I just put 1 and 1, I'll say 2 and 2 to
Right.
make 2 different tracks. That's why it's just divided in half. So they are, one is where my house actually is, and I left the other one open.
Right, okay.
And so that's why it's like that. And then my parents still own the one next to it, which is all just the countries, so.
Yeah.
So there's no sidewalks, that's why it stayed as agriculture, because there's really nothing.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
thank you.
I have just like a general question, Mr. Botello, and this is just a general question. When folks decide to, they get advised and they submit their application, does staff have contact with them? I know you take pictures and stuff, but do we have like meetings with them or anything of that sort, so then when we get to Board of Adjustment, anything like that?
It depends on the applicant and whether, you know, if they request a meeting,
Okay.
we're more than happy to you know, be in attendance.
Just wanted to
Yes.
ask, just when we go out and take pictures and stuff, just what that interaction is. Thank you.
Yeah, because based on the conversations had from previous BOA meetings, you guys brought up good points about inspecting the properties and taking a closer look. So, you know, in this case, we decided to go out there to inspect the progress of the structure and, you know, made some determinations based off of that inspection.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Like I said, I appreciate the difference in the way that the report is being done and the pictures and the different points that you all have added to it. So that makes it seamless in a way. Any questions, comments, or yourself?
No.
May I restate the motion? Thank you. I have a motion made by Ben Aras to table item for next Board of Adjustment meeting, second by Jesus Ruiz. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstain? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 9, consider and take action on the adjournment of this meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion made by Ben Aras to approve adjourn meeting, second by Miriam Cruz. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstain? Motion carried. Meeting adjourned at 6:58. Thank you all for